Credo di avere la vostra attenzione. Buonasera, signor Governatore, signora Vicepresidente del Senato, signor Vice Ministro, signor Direttore Generale della Banca d'Italia, illustri rappresentanti del corpo diplomatico, autorità, cari amici, compagne e compagni. Perdonate il momento goliardico, però la tentazione era veramente troppo forte. Come sapete, la presa del Palazzo d'Inverno avvenne il 25 ottobre del 1917, calendario giuliano, cioè il 7 novembre del calendario gregoriano. L'Istituto Bruno Leoni, dunque, quest'anno ha organizzato la sua cena annuale in corrispondenza con l'anniversario della Rivoluzione d'Ottobre. Io, dopo questo, non so più cosa inventarmi. Come sapete, Carlo Marx sarebbe stato inorridito ad apprendere che la rivoluzione avveniva in Russia, in un paese arretrato, mentre al contrario, forse lo sfondo lo possiamo cambiare adesso, in un paese arretrato appunto, e non invece nel cuore dei paesi avanzati. Non a caso predicava da un giornale di New York: il modo di produzione capitalistico avrebbe dovuto essere superato appunto nei paesi più avanzati. Alcune notizie di questa settimana hanno riacceso in molti la speranza che il Moro di Treveri non avesse poi tanto torto. Io non credo sia il caso di esagerare l'importanza dell'elezione di un sindaco, anche se è il sindaco di New York. Però forse, parlando ora seriamente, l'elezione di Zoran Mandani e il successo del suo repertorio retorico-ideologico ci ricorda quella che è la necessaria premessa delle attività di un istituto come l'Istituto Bruno Leoni, cioè che le idee presto o tardi hanno delle conseguenze, anche se seguono percorsi tortuosi. Le idee si intende quelle giuste come quelle sbagliate. Non esiste purtroppo una ricetta sicura per far sì che siano le prime e non le seconde a intercettare il consenso e a plasmare l'immaginazione delle persone. C'è però qualcosa che possiamo fare. Possiamo almeno impegnarci perché le idee di libertà mettano radici più salde, cosa che abbiamo visto è possibile persino in terreni difficili come l'Argentina. Queste idee possono raggiungere nuovi talenti nella politica e nella comunicazione solo nel momento in cui aumenta il numero delle persone che le condividono e soprattutto dei giovani che le condividono e soprattutto dei giovani in gamba che le condividono. A nutrire queste idee l'Istituto Bruno Leoni ci prova tutti i giorni e lo può fare grazie al vostro sostegno, per cui grazie. Grazie ovviamente anche al nostro board, a cominciare dal nostro presidente Franco De Benedetti, che non era coinvolto nella scelta di questo avvio di serata, ci tengo a sottolinearlo, e grazie a tutti i nostri collaboratori, a tutti quelli che lavorano con noi, soprattutto questa sera, grazie a chi mette l'anima tutti gli anni in questa serata, cioè grazie a Sara Scordari. Lo scorso anno, alcuni di voi se lo ricorderanno, in questa stessa occasione premiavamo Maria Corina Machado, che qualche settimana fa ha avuto un premio meno rilevante ma più noto del Premio Bruno Leoni. Quest'anno invece abbiamo deciso di fare una scelta totalmente diversa, cioè per la prima volta abbiamo dato un premio non a un individuo, non a una persona, bensì a tutto un paese. Non siamo riusciti ovviamente a portarlo qui tutto un paese, siete tanti, ma non così tanti. ovvero alle donne e agli uomini di un paese che hanno avuto la forza negli anni scorsi di abbandonare abitudini radicate nel tempo, invertendo la rotta e compiendo uno straordinario aggiustamento di finanza pubblica a dispetto delle grandi difficoltà. Ancora nel 2015 un premio Nobel per l'economia, Joseph Stiglitz, un bu ci starebbe bene, Bu! Profetizzava che quei cambiamenti, che quel cambio di passo avrebbe messo in crisi lo stesso processo democratico e accompagnato il Paese verso la depressione. È avvenuto esattamente il contrario. Quel Paese, come suggerisce la grafica alle mie spalle, è la Grecia e noi siamo molto grati al Governatore della Banca Centrale Greca, Yannis Stournaras, di essere qui con noi. Il Governatore Stournaras ha studiato all'Università di Atene, si è addottorato a Oxford, è stato, cosa che ce lo rende particolarmente simpatico, il direttore di un importante think tank greco, poi è stato Ministro delle Finanze dal 2012 al 2014 e infine appunto Governatore della Banca Centrale. E da Governatore della Banca Centrale, soprattutto in mesi difficili che qualcuno ricorderà nel 2015, ne ha preservato l'indipendenza, dando un grande contributo al processo di risanamento e alla credibilità delle istituzioni di quel Paese. Prima di cedere la parola al Governatore Stournaras, in rappresentanza del suo Paese, gli consegniamo il Premio Bruno Leoni 2025. Il Premio Bruno Leoni 2025 va alla Grecia con questa motivazione: per aver avuto la forza e la determinazione di prendere, nonostante i costi sociali immediati, la difficile strada del risanamento economico e della crescita. Viva la Grecia, zito i Ellada, Governor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Esteemed guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, it's a great honor to receive recognition from the Istituto Bruno Leoni for the efforts undertaken by my country, Greece, to overcome the debt crisis. In two public roles, as finance minister from mid-2012 to mid-2014, and central bank governor since then, I have sought to actively support this national effort, deeply rooted in the determination and aspirations of the Greek people, while at the same time safeguarding the independence of the Bank of Greece and Greece's participation in the Eurozone. In my remarks today, I will offer a concise view of how Greece entered the debt crisis, but most importantly, how it got out of it despite the gloomy forecasts of many market analysts, policymakers, and academics who predicted Grexit twice in 2012 and 2015, and the key lessons to be drawn from that experience. I will then outline the substantial progress achieved in recent years and the outlook for the Greek economy before concluding with the lasting legacy of the crisis and the challenges that still lie ahead, both for Greece and for the Eurozone more broadly. So, what led to the Greek crisis? Following a rather strong and sustained nominal convergence effort in the 90s, during which nominal interest rates fell by more than 15 percentage points, Greece experienced strong economic growth, low inflation, and falling unemployment from 2000 to 2007, largely driven by rapid credit expansion and cheap borrowing. particularly following entry into the Eurozone in 2001. However, structural weaknesses remained. The Maastricht criteria for the participation in the Eurozone focused mostly on nominal convergence, inflation, deficit, a falling debt ratio, interest rates, and the exchange rate, but did not require deep and sustainable reforms in labor markets, product markets, the pension system, and public administration to improve structural competitiveness and institutional capacity. As a result, while GDP, that is national income per capita, rose rapidly and approached the European Union average, governance, productivity, pension system sustainability, and structural competitiveness did not follow, while the fiscal deficit remained almost twice as high as the reference value. In fact, towards the end of 2000s, fiscal policy became overly expansionary, driven by the political cycle, while real wage growth exceeded productivity growth by a wide margin. The ensuing real exchange rate appreciation, along with rapid economic growth, led to a large current account deficit. The general government deficit in 2008 and 2009 jumped to 10% and 15% of GDP respectively, from 6% on average in the period 2000-2007. The public debt ratio jumped to 128% of GDP in 2009 from 104% in 2007. Hence, the Greek crisis did not start as a banking crisis, as in many other member states, but as a fiscal crisis, which led to a current account crisis, a sovereign debt crisis, and finally, it also ended as a banking crisis through government bond losses, withdrawal of deposits, and an explosion of non-performing loans. Crucially, Greece failed to use the favorable pre-crisis period to address persistent vulnerabilities. Public administration remained inefficient, tax evasion was widespread, the pension system remained unsustainable, and the public debt ratio stayed constant, but high, around 105% of GDP, before it exploded in 2008 and 2009 to unsustainable levels. So when the sovereign debt crisis hit in 2010, Greece rapidly lost market access. Greek ratings were downgraded, bond yields exploded, and both the government and the banking sector were cut off from international funding. Depositors withdrew cash. Real estate collateral values slumped, and liquidity conditions deteriorated sharply. Greece attempted to address the large fiscal and external imbalances in its first economic adjustment program through a rapid fiscal consolidation and reforms to achieve the necessary improvement in competitiveness in the absence of an exchange rate devaluation. Fiscal consolidation relied more on tax increases rather than spending cuts and pro-growth reforms. With the benefit of hindsight, reforms were rather poorly sequenced under the insistence of the three institutions, that is, the European Commission, the IMF, and the ECB, targeting labor markets first and then product markets. But as a result, nominal wages declined faster, much faster than prices, leading to falling real wages and collapsing household consumption, further exacerbating the recession. Banking sector fragility was aggravated by soaring non-performing loans. European Union level weaknesses further worsened the crisis as early EMU architecture lacked the tools for crisis management, debt relief was delayed, and the sovereign bank doom loop amplified instability until decisive ECB intervention, the whatever it takes, as it is well known, in mid-2012 finally stabilized conditions. In response to the sovereign debt crisis, Greece actually implemented 3 consecutive economic adjustment programs from 2010 onwards, supported by the 3 institutions and its European partners. These programs aimed at fiscal consolidation, structural reforms, and banking system stabilization to restore macroeconomic balance and regain market confidence. The programs finally achieved their major stabilization goals. The primary fiscal deficit of 10.1% of GDP in 2009 turned into a primary surplus exceeding 4% of GDP by 2018, while the current account deficit fell by roughly 12 percentage points between 2009 and 2018. Comprehensive structural reforms were implemented in pensions, healthcare, labor markets, tax administration, and public administration, improving long-term competitiveness and fiscal sustainability. At the same time, Greece began rebalancing its growth model towards exports and tradable activities. The banking sector underwent a very deep restructuring. Extensive mergers and liquidations reduced the system to 4 systemic banks, now controlling over 95% of the market. The Bank of Greece played a pivotal role by ensuring monetary and financial stability, maintaining liquidity, securing uninterrupted cash availability nationwide, and coordinating closely with the ECB and European supervisory authorities. Thanks to mechanisms such as the Hellenic Financial Stability Fund and the Hellenic Asset Protection Scheme, the non-performing loan ratio was slashed from almost 50% in 2016 to 3.6% by mid-2025, while capital ratios, profitability, and resilience, regulatory resilience, all improved significantly. Capital controls actually were imposed in 2015, 2019 to protect financial stability. In fact, not a single euro of deposits was lost. Thus, we fully protected financial stability, even in the most difficult period during which the majority of analysts, academics, and unfortunately certain policymakers predicted or even advised Grexit. However, the adjustment came at a substantial social and economic cost. The process relied more on tax increases, as I said, rather than expenditure reforms or investment-friendly policies, and privatization targets were largely unmet in the beginning. The 3 institutions insisted on excessive and rapid fiscal adjustment and ignored its impact on growth, employment, social cohesion, tax revenue, and the snowball effect, that is the difference between the effective nominal interest rate on public debt and the nominal growth rate, a difference, a crucial difference, which determines to a large extent the dynamic path of the public debt to GDP ratio. Between 2008 and 2016, Greece lost over 25% of its GDP. The unemployment rate surged by 16 percentage points. Inequality and poverty indices soared. Investment collapsed, and a massive brain drain occurred. Thus, while macroeconomic stabilization and banking repair were ultimately successful, the cost in terms of lost output, social cohesion, and long-term human and physical capital was rather immense. So, what are the lessons learned from the Greek crisis, in my view? So, this crisis offers several key lessons for economic policy, for monetary union governance, and crisis management. First, political ownership and credibility matter the most. Populism, political polarization, and vested interests can hold back reforms and undermine economic recovery. Strong political leadership, institutional commitment, and transparent policy frameworks enhance confidence among investors, households, and international partners. Second, fiscal and external imbalances must be addressed before they reach unsustainable levels. Reliance only on nominal convergence criteria without structural reforms can mask vulnerabilities and delay the necessary adjustments. Member states entering a monetary union need to strengthen institutions, governance, and structural competitiveness in parallel with fiscal convergence. Labor cost competitiveness is a necessary, but it is not a sufficient condition for structural competitiveness. Third, the sequencing and the design of structural reforms matter a lot. Reforms that excessively depress wages or focus narrowly on one sector can exacerbate recessions. A balanced approach that combines fiscal consolidation with growth-enhancing structural measures and public investment is essential. Legislative and administrative capacity must be sufficient to implement reforms efficiently and effectively. Fourth, the banking sector requires careful oversight and timely interventions during crisis. The failure to early manage non-performing loans prolonged the recession and weakened the bank's capacity to finance the real economy. A systemic solution for distressed assets at the earliest possible moment, supported by an appropriate legal and institutional framework, is rather critical. Fifth, the architecture of a monetary union affects crisis resolution. The absence of effective risk-sharing mechanisms, crisis management tools, and coordinated oversight within Economic and Monetary Union, EMU, amplified Greece's difficulties. Timely ECB intervention, the creation of the European Stability Mechanism, public debt restructuring, and favorable refinancing conditions were essential to prevent a disorderly default and stabilize the system. Notably, Greece ultimately benefited from a generous debt refinancing on very favorable terms, which created a favorable snowball effect by allowing the debt to GDP ratio to improve as the effective interest rate on public debt remained below GDP nominal growth for extended periods. In addition, the ECB waiver ensured the smooth refinancing of the Greek banking system during the crisis years, a support that was no longer necessary once Greece regained investment-grade status. Finally, crisis management requires both fiscal discipline but also support for long-term growth. Greece's experience demonstrates that adjustment programs can restore macroeconomic balance and improve competitiveness, but at a very high social cost. Future policy programs, if needed, should balance fiscal targets with structural reforms and growth-oriented policies to minimize social hardship and shorten recovery periods. Public investment should be exempted, actually, from expenditure cuts, while the effects on the public debt ratio from the improvement in the primary balance of the general government from fiscal measures should be considered along with the snowball effect. In sum, Greece's crisis underscores the need for robust institutions, both at home and in the European Union, effective governance, prudent fiscal policies, and comprehensive structural reforms. The combination of domestic weaknesses, institutional gaps, delayed reforms, and external shocks created one of the most severe economic crises in history. Yet, the response through the adjustment programs has restored macroeconomic and financial stability, fiscal sustainability, and competitiveness, offering valuable lessons for both Greece but also other members of monetary unions. In addition, Greece, to also revoke some Marxist views, acted as a midwife of history. Due to the Greek crisis, the Eurozone and Europe created new institutions and obtained experience and the necessary mentality and attitude for crisis management, which proved useful later during the COVID-19 pandemic. Hopefully, it will continue to prove useful in the years ahead. Since then, Greece has undergone a profound economic transformation in recent years, emerging as one of the Eurozone's strongest performers after a decade of crisis and structural adjustment. Since 2019, Greece's GDP growth has consistently outpaced the Eurozone average, bringing the country back to a path of convergence towards European income levels following many years of divergence. In the first half of 2025, real GDP grew by approximately 2% year-on-year, significantly above the euro area average, and the Bank of Greece expects comparable growth rates to be sustained through at least 2027. Most importantly, this trajectory is not underpinned by short-term stimulus, but rather by strong fundamentals, solid public finances, resilient household consumption, a powerful rebound in investment, also supported by the Recovery and Resilience Facility, and exceptional export performance, particularly tourism, logistics, digital services, and innovation-intensive manufacturing sectors. Meanwhile, the labor market has strengthened, with unemployment falling to single-digit levels for the first time since the beginning of the crisis, a labor force participation rising, while exports reach is extending beyond tourism towards high value-added manufacturing goods. Rising disposable incomes and the market decline in inequality, poverty, and social exclusion indices between 2019 and 2023 demonstrate that the recovery is now translating into social welfare gains as well, rather than just macroeconomic ones. Macroeconomic governance has been instrumental in rebuilding international confidence. Greece continues to deliver robust primary budget surpluses and overall budget surpluses without reverting to restrictive fiscal policy measures, but instead supported by disciplined public finances, improved tax administration, and a forceful crackdown on tax evasion. Public debt is firmly declining as a percentage of GDP, driven by strong nominal GDP growth and favorable debt service conditions. Sound fiscal policies have created space for targeted tax relief, protection of vulnerable households, and investment in digital, green, and infrastructure priorities, all while remaining fully aligned with the European Union new fiscal rules. International rating agencies have responded with sovereign and banking upgrades, helping to attract renewed foreign capital into Greek assets. However, the external environment remains fragile. Geopolitical instability, protectionist pressures, financial fragmentation, major climate disruption, and energy volatility are sources of considerable downside risks. At home, certain legacy issues from the crisis, such as private debt, lower capital stock and labor force, a persistent investment gap, as well as demographic pressures, low female and youth labor force participation, and delays in judicial and administrative reform remain unresolved, while housing costs continue to impose a growing burden on households. Against this background, Greece has shifted its focus from recovery to strategic acceleration. Its central economic objective is now to secure long-term real convergence with the euro area, but without recreating past large macroeconomic imbalances. Achieving this requires closing the remaining investment gap and sustaining productivity gains by efficiently mobilizing and allocating domestic resources, European Union structural and RRF funds, as well as foreign direct investment, especially in sectors producing internationally traded goods and services, in a world increasingly shaped by technological progress and geopolitical competition. Macroeconomic, fiscal, and financial stability must remain the linchpin. Strict adherence to European Union rules and accelerated debt reduction, including early repayment of the Greek loan facility, will be essential to preserve credibility. But stability is not enough. Fiscal strategy needs to become intrinsically pro-growth, redirecting spending towards infrastructure, education, innovation, demographic support, while modernizing further the tax system to reinforce competitiveness and fairness. The decisive battleground is now mobilization of investment. Recovery and resilient facilities deployment must be fast and effective, but external funding alone is not sufficient. Private capital must be aggressively attracted through faster licensing, capital market deepening, and non-bank finance development, while private savings should be rebuilt through the enhancement of the fully funded pillars of the pension system, the provision of incentives for closing the insurance gap for natural catastrophes, and improvements in financial literacy. Finally, Greece must treat the green and digital transitions not as obligations, but as a strategic competitiveness opportunities. Accelerated investment in renewables, grid capacity, interconnections, artificial intelligence readiness, and circular economy innovation is essential, as is a housing policy shift from subsidies to structural supply-side reform. If policy consistency, institutional credibility, and reform momentum are maintained, Greece is positioned not merely to sustain recovery, but to graduate into a phase of permanently higher investment ratio, productivity growth, and economic resilience. The Greek crisis showcased the vital need for fiscal discipline and debt sustainability in the euro area. It also highlighted that structural rigidities must be addressed to boost productivity and investment. Greece's experience underscores the importance of innovation, high-tech transition, efficient use of EU funds and foreign direct investment, deeper capital markets, and secure, affordable energy to enhance long-term competitiveness and resilience. However, Greece and other member states must remain fully committed to structural reforms. A purely national strategy is no longer sufficient. The global environment has shifted dramatically in just a few years, with rising geopolitical fragmentation, armed conflicts, trade tensions, tariffs, and intensifying technological rivalry among major powers. Europe as a whole now confronts a broad set of challenges, not only economic, but also technological, environmental, energy, and security related. It is increasingly clear that a coherent European-wide strategy is required, in line with the strategic thinking reflected in recent high-level reports, such as the LETA report on deepening the single market and eliminating the still large internal barriers to trade in goods and services, as well as the Draghi report on Europe's investment needs, productivity, and competitiveness. Only through coordinated joint action can the European Union hope to close productivity and innovation gaps, reinforce resilience, and preserve its strategic autonomy. So, concluding, in this regard, recent European Union initiatives such as the Arm Europe Plan and Readiness 2030, as well as the European Commission's Competitiveness Compass and Clean Industry Pact, signal a major policy shift towards a stronger, forward-looking industrial and strategic posture which seek to incentivize investment in new technologies and innovation. These initiatives support deeper market integration and stimulate large-scale investment in critical technologies and infrastructure, thereby increasing resilience to external shocks. Completing the banking union, especially through the establishment of a European deposit insurance scheme, and launching a true savings and investment union would significantly reduce financial fragmentation. So, building on the success of the next generation EU, the issuance of a permanent common European Union safe asset, such as a Eurobond, could catalyze cross-border investment, strengthen the international role of the euro, and decisively enhance Europe's long-term competitiveness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Governor, for this crystal clear speech. The speech will be available to people, to all of us later on. E adesso noi vi accompagniamo verso la cena con un contributo particolare. Avrete trovato all'ingresso un piccolo testo di Nicola Rossi, che ringrazio molto per questa serata e per tante altre cose, che è una storia, che è questa storia, è la storia di come è cambiata l'economia in Grecia. Ebbene, abbiamo chiesto, e ringrazio moltissimo specialmente Veronica Cancelliere per questo, a dei creativi di provare a interpretare quella storia come un piccolo monologo e ci salutiamo su quello. Grazie mille, buona serata a tutti.
Pensa a una partita giocata senza mai avere le carte giuste, bluffando e poi ancora bluffando, prima e anche subito dopo l'entrata nell'euro. Così la Grecia ha costruito un castello impressionante, ma le fondamenta, quelle erano di sabbia, una sabbia nascosta dall'euforia e dalla disinvoltura contabile che spesso annunciano il peggio. Quando nel 2008 è arrivato il vento della crisi globale, tutti abbiamo sentito il freddo. E quando il nuovo governo ha rivelato che il deficit reale era il 15,4% del PIL, non il 6%, le carte sono crollate. Un crollo drammatico. Non una semplice recessione, una caduta paragonabile a quella di una guerra, con il PIL che si schianta del 25% e la disoccupazione che esplode. La colpa non era del vento, i problemi erano lì, in casa. Quando i creditori hanno chiesto il conto, la rabbia popolare è esplosa, prima contro i politici che avevano costruito consenso con la spesa, poi contro l'austerità, percepita come un'imposizione. Ma era solo la conseguenza inevitabile per evitare il collasso. E così è arrivata la tentazione di rifiutare la realtà, la promessa di stracciare i patti, un referendum per dire no all'austerità, un no d'orgoglio che si è scontrato con il principio di realtà. Le banche hanno chiuso, i bancomat si sono svuotati. Quell'illusione è durata un attimo. Per evitare l'uscita dall'euro, lo stesso governo che aveva promosso il no ha dovuto firmare un accordo ancora più duro. Si è capito che non c'erano scorciatoie, che per restare nel gioco bisognava accettare le regole di disciplina, di responsabilità. Le riforme strutturali, la libertà d'impresa, un fisco diverso, l'attrazione di investimenti esteri sono state le nuove carte. La Grecia ha cominciato a giocare con le sue forze, tanto che i giovani che l'avevano lasciata nel pieno della crisi tornano oggi a guardarla come un'opportunità. La lezione alla fine è chiara. Puoi provare a bluffare, ma i conti prima o poi tornano sempre. La sostenibilità del debito non è un tecnicismo, ma la condizione per la crescita. E affrontare la verità, anche se fa male, non è una punizione. È l'unico modo per essere liberi di giocare la mano successiva.